one person. You don't like in church. Come to the front, come to the front.
No, we don't know about that. I think people are stuck out front because
Tēnā koutou katoa. Well, on behalf of Te Kahui Whaihanga, the New Zealand Institute of Architects Wellington branch, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the penultimate City Talk of the year. To start, I have a whirlwind of thank yous. Firstly, thank you to Victoria Willix and the amazing Moana Poynton from Te Heranga Waka. Thank you to our branch members Amelia and Judy. I haven't forgotten Judy. I know, where is she?
Judy.
We'll shame her collectively when she comes in. I've agreed. And the very hard-working Sam from Moments Production at the back. And thank you to our sponsors, Nushantal. Did you know that they make a special little video at the beginning of our recordings? It's fantastic. It makes us feel very, very special. So thank you to them. All of these people have made a great contribution to bringing together all the efforts to bring you tonight's phenomenal pair, architectural illustrators Chrissy Hill and Ian Stanshall. For the last 25 years, the duo have been creating windows into the future for a wide array of clients. Chrissy, I'm told, is a Wellingtonian through and through, and Ian, to my surprise, is from Lynn. It's very rare to find someone from my hometown. So shout out to the mighty Horowhenua.
Yeah.
Architectural illustration is a curious art, one of stealth and extraordinary impact. The significance of it is easily overlooked, but very simply, it asks us to imagine a future together. It transforms the places that surround us while retaining a democratic familiarity. Their images put you at ease, and they ask you to engage, to dream. It's an extraordinary feat, and it's a great pleasure tonight to have the chance to hear about the inner workings, their insights, and what it truly means to be in perspective. So please join me in warmly welcoming Chrissy and Ian.
Thank you, Tina, and kia ora koutou to everybody. And ngā mihi to Tina and to the NZIA and te he renga waka. In perspective, yeah, it's a familiar word. It's together and apart is really about Chrissy and I plus our artworks. In a perspective, though, a vanishing point is one of the key components. And however, on a bit of paper, it exists as a point, which is a two-dimensional space. On a three-dimensional space, like a space like we have here, it's an abstract that represents infinity. So if you can get your head around that. Reflecting on this, the lines to and from the vanishing point take on quite a unique significance for us as our commissioned work, our personal and separate art practices converge and diverge.
All right. Well, 2024 was a big year for Stanchel Studio to celebrate and reflect. It's our opinion any business that stood a 25-year test of time deserves to acknowledge that milestone. So what better way for an illustration company and its arty-farty directors to have an exhibition? So we made a submission to our local community gallery, Thistle Hall, for an exhibition date to coincide with the anniversary of Stanchel Studio Limited, which was incorporated on the 9th of the 9th, 1999. So I don't know what that means, but it's been good. Anyway, so we put in the submission only to be turned down. I mean, excuse me. So not to be discouraged, remembering we had withstood the bows and arrows of the GFC, industry crises and the Y2K bug. So we honed our kaupapa and our artist statements, which actually really helped, didn't they, in clarifying our intent and vision. And then we boldly reapplied. And here we are today, speaking to you this evening, an esteemed audience of academics, industry heavyweights, colleagues and friends, and with our names on billboards around the city. Who'd have thought, eh? Yeah. So our intention was for this tightly curated exhibition to show a body of Stanchel Studio works and to celebrate our separate but parallel art practices. Ian's mixed media work, pen and ink sketches and monotype prints of structures and plans, and Chrissy's oil on canvas and monotype prints. Her perspective on Wellington's distinctive and eclectic architecture and its environs. But the story started all before this, didn't it?
Right. Back in the 1970s at architecture school, we were very privileged to have Pat Hanley and Gretchen Albrecht as our art tutors in freehand drawing. Both were esteemed artists at that time, and they still are in their artworks, and Gretchen still produces work today. They were influential in both early beginnings, not only on how to draw, but for me, it was how to see. Most Wednesday mornings we would go out in the first 2 years of architecture school. We'd head out into the streets and we would study and practice drawing and seeing and looking. Pat's advice was to look for the big picture. And the big picture was about big ideas and what is the essence of a drawing, and how do you replicate that onto a canvas or paper or whatever you choose. This was in the days though when, rent for a flat was $5, another $5 for your food kitty, and I had been granted, fortunately, with a Ministry of Works student bursary. Now, which this was a generous contribution from the taxpayer for $400 annually. Not a huge amount, but it went a long way to cover those costs in those days. Enough also for me to buy my first cassette player, which was an Akai. Yeah, I don't know if you can buy Akais anymore. Weekends would often find us, or find me sometimes with other architecture students of like-minded drawing interest down back parts of Auckland. This is in the railway station. Nitty-gritty places of the city which provided me with interesting, useful subject matter. The ability to draw was not only a useful tool in those days, but it was actually an essential part of an architectural education. This kind of went on for a few years, because after graduation, many of us worked for a few years before we go on our overseas experience. And these are just a few kind of little sketches from my sketchbook. We were experiencing, I suppose, architecture firsthand and for the first time, so it was a pretty heady kind of combination of art and architecture, but mostly for me it was about recording and understanding the nature of the built environment. The process of drawing was really about engaging and having a more detailed understanding of what we were looking at and how these things were created. These are just some excerpts, sketches of historic and contemporary buildings in Bologna in Italy. Always plenty of interesting people, usually unwitting subjects, and so you had to be a little bit discreet when you were drawing, except for the bullfight band, but I was more keen on representing them, drawing them, rather than looking at the carnage in the arena, which was down below, and it was red and gory and dead bulls. The trains and other public transport would provide adequate subjects while you're sitting and watching, waiting for the next bus or public transport. So these are just some other sketches trying to understand how some of these public spaces worked. The cafe scenes were pretty enticing places to be at, and the way that the light was monitored and sunlight handled. So trying to sort of analyse them and kind of record for future use.
I like the waiter up the top. Is he standing on the roof?
Standing.
Yeah.
However, the pull of home was too strong, and with the Ministry of Works bond obligation hanging over me a little, I was called back. We bursars were bonded to the Ministry of Works for 5 years. So by the time I had done my first 2 years, registered overseas, back for another 3 years. So then I came home and started to work on some quite large-scale buildings. One of them being the pride of my architectural experience. And this is the power station and the control building of Clyde High Power Dam, Clyde High Dam. But these were kind of interesting projects for a while, and mostly engineering driven. Then I moved on to some less high energy type of projects as a sole practitioner and other small practices, including theirs was Webster Fletcher Stanchion of the Starpin, or WFSV for short. And this was in the mid-80s on the corner of Cuba, just around the corner of Cuba and Vivian Street. That was up above what is now Kisa. So now we live and work on the corner of Marion and Vivian Street. Haven't come far, really.
No.
Started moonlighting for Athfield Architects in the late 80s, carrying out part-time work, illustration, working late into the night. I'd really like to acknowledge Ath at this point, you would recognise him on the left, for the opportunities that he offered at that time, both in design and in illustration, because he was a very competent watercolourist himself. Later, permanent position came available, and I was worked there at Athfield Architects as an architect and continuing with illustration work, which kept me very happy. In particular, the times we worked remotely at Athfield, at Awaroa, was some of the more memorable times of that part of my life. As both Dickie and Ath were already Ian's, Dickie's on the right here, I was given the name Stan to avoid confusion. So there were no Ians there, and the name has carried with me, and I've always seen it as a part of a bit of a term of endearment.
Anyway.
And meanwhile, around 1994, along came part woman, part computer. I met Chrissy across a crowded room. She was introduced to me as the voice of Telecom, which was the Telecom Directory Service. Now, with my interest quite well peaked in a new crush, I would ring, while I was up at Athfield Architects, I would ring Directory Service while during morning tea, multiple times, to share her dulcet tones around the staff room. And I would ring up.
The code is 04. The number is 4737746. Stay on the line and an operator will return.
So this was no part woman, this was actually all woman. Wanting to show some early examples of pre-digital works.
In the exhibition.
This was in the exhibition. There were two images courtesy of the Athfield Architect Archive. Some of you will be familiar with this one, which is Clyde Key Tavern. The early illustration work of the 80s and 90s was fostered there at Athfield Architects. Mostly it was pencil and watercolour for me. It was a medium that had some attraction because it was soft, it was sexy, a little sexy, some bit of sexy there. And it was, it had a endearing sort of nature to it. And so in those days, the original watercolours were professionally photographed with no scanners or digital editing or anything like that. All printing was outsourced, done by professional photographers. Clyde Key Tavern here was the subject of a number of iterations, including a very fine Egyptian version. But neither this one or this postmodern whare, I suppose you could call it, or the Egyptian version survived through to develop design. And we have now got a Clyde Key Tavern that has a slight degree less flourish than this one.
Okay, we've got to move on.
Te Puna Koukiri House received a new headpiece in the late 90s, and I see Ashley up there who's familiar with this. Athill Architects sort of described this in their book, one of their books. The modulation of the 4-floor lantern addition synchronises with the rhythm of the original undulating facade, a pattern emphasised by large sandblasted aluminium fins providing sun protection without interrupting views. And that's what those are. I think the real building is actually does the design a lot more justice than this does. But I always thought of this addition as a bit of a cheeky hat. But illustrating all this detail was sort of quite you need patience, and you needed the mapping pens, and you needed rulers, and you needed watercolour, and that was about it. So, Chrissy.
Yeah, well, Stan was up the hill at Athfields, but also doing illustration PJs at the kitchen table after the kids went to bed and late into the night. As his illustration skills were in very high demand, and the money was quite good. So my movie star career was on the wane, as it does, with the showbiz saying that no one loves a fairy over 40. So I was looking for a new opportunity, and there I was, sitting at the kitchen table. So it took some convincing, didn't it, to get you to consider the idea of setting up an architectural illustration studio. But it seemed the further we explored these possibilities, the more opportunities opened up, as did a small studio space for startups via Vic Link in the original 1930 Met Service ex-geophysics building in the Botanic Gardens. Funnily enough, that also turned into an additional business opportunity, as just as we got settled in, Vic Link's lease ran out and Doc was selling the building. So with a small group of other start-uppers, we formed a company and bought the building, which we still own today, and spaces are leased to an interesting mix-up of scientists, techies, publishers, architects, and psychologists.
So in 1999 we then started the studio with enthusiasm, with all the latest equipment. We had a Grant enlarger, we called it the grunt machine, all the way from Pahatanui on a late night trailer. Too big for the modest studio that we had, so we consigned it to a cupboard in the corridor. But the box steps that you had to climb up to use it meant that your head banged on the jamb of the door. And I think we donated it soon after to the Sallies.
Didn't work, did it?
And the antique drawing machine was a little bit like that one. And then we started, we better get a computer. So we shared a Ruby, Mac, and we affectionately called this Ruby.
Yeah.
And we shared a cell phone. When cell phones became available, we had alternate use of both of these. So morning times Chrissy, and then in the afternoon I had it.
Yeah. We did have a couple of chairs though. We had one each, didn't we? We didn't have to share the chairs.
Well, we didn't have chairs first. We couldn't afford chairs. But I was standing at the grunt machine most of the time.
Trying to work it out. Anyway, so there's a bit of background. Fast forward to 2024 and to our In Perspective Together in a Part exhibition, a celebration of 25 years of Stanchill Studio. And that was quite a fortuitous photo with a reflection through the window. And
Yeah, so that's sort of...
anyway, so the Together in a Part exhibition was intentionally set up in 3 sections. The 2 apart section showed my work on the right wall and Ian's on the left. Distinct differences: wild flourish on the right and strict linear broom up boom on the left. one together section on the back wall of the gallery which shows examples of the studio work curated from the last 25 years. Okay. And
these here out of focus shots are some of the works I did as personal works, I suppose, comprising a collection of watercoloured prints, watercoloured, hand-coloured prints. These were kind of inspired by the beauty of some of the places around the water edges that we had visited, and these are local ones, well, reasonably local, Torrent Bay in the Abel Tasman, and Ruakaka Bay in the Marlborough Sounds, which were some of the ones that were exhibited there. Architectural components were usually featured in some way that captured my attention. These three works were a bit different. They were in response to a visit to Japan. The Tokyo railway system had their wayfinding plans and had a strong transport component in the graphics, and they translated well into woodcut and monotype prints. While these were quite exploratory works, they did attract some positive results with the red dots. Yeah, we like those.
Yeah, could have sold those. Anyway, just briefly touching on my stuff. On the left here, we've got Camouflage Pansy, which is after Sam Mitchell. It's been back painted on acrylic sheet. I did a week's workshop with Sam, and she showed me her techniques, and actually that's a really difficult thing to do because, anyway, I won't go into it. But there is Bollards 1 and Bollards 2, which you'll recognise from the waterfront. I particularly love the rainbow one. And lastly, on the right, it's called Art Expletive, which was, I had to start filling out some canvases because I thought I didn't have enough to put in the exhibition. So I started experimenting with fluoro acrylics, and then I overpainted with some oil glaze, and yeah, that was the result of that. This is part of the eclectic bunch of stuff in subject matter, mostly oil on canvas. There are these monotype prints as well, which we've both enjoyed, and we managed to get to Sydney on this one up here and do a lovely workshop on monoprints there. Here's a few more. The pieces on the left indicate interest that I obviously had in architecture, form and subject matter, and some vignettes scenes from our 7th floor window, which is the sheet on the line. That's the Marion Street one. Now this garnered quite a bit of interest. There I've got another one of these. This was my daughter's drawers, so this is a still life, and we had a very famous, two famous 4x4 tents in the apartment, didn't we? And we had AstroTurf on the ground, and we've got these old motel drawers. Anyway, she was a real mess, and I said, "Come on, pick those things up, will you, off the floor?" So this is the result of her picking them off the floor. And I walked past and I thought, "Oh gosh, that's going to make a very good still life." But anyway, they've both gone, and they're going to London. So this is Hang On in There. So this is our view from our north-facing window in the big apartment over to Marion Street Apartments, and they always have an array of washing there. And this particularly took my attention, yeah. And I just managed to add a few, as you can see, a few hands and fingers there, just sort of, yeah. And you will all be familiar with this. This was in homage to the 50th anniversary up at Athfield Architects, where they lit up the whole building. I don't know that a lot of you would have been there, and and it was a beautiful sight, and I just thought, well, yeah, that deserves to be painted. This is as you can see, a still life with peas and hair. A very interesting combination. Anyway, and this is a transition from my work into Stanchial Studio work with an architectural focus, of course, with the two Athfield turrets. And then here, there we go.
Yeah, so due to a little bit of time limitations, we're focusing some of the studio work on a limited selection of the award images. And over the years, we've been fortunate enough to receive some of the awards of excellence from the American Society of Architectural Illustrators, which is known as the ASAI. Some of these had received awards and sometimes a juror's award. These are presented annually at the ASAI conference, and each year a different international location. So, in the years that we received awards, we had a great reason to travel. And the following are a bit of a collection of ones from those projects, so images from those projects and from the trips away. So the Clearwater project by Warren Marnie Architects
it was our very first one, wasn't it, in 2002?
Yeah, in 2002 the studio was still in quite early stages of Photoshop editing, so we were experimenting with hand-drawn components and watercolour washes on a digital platform rather than a watercolour paper platform. We were exploring the potential of multi-layer Photoshop techniques, and we were pretty excited with our first award.
Yes.
Well, Photoshop was gaining quite significant ground as a graphic tool in the studio. Hand-drawn and line and texture watercolour washes, etc., was still the predominant technique. Our graphic library of components was starting to expand, and this meant that a particular evocative watercolour wash for a sky, for example, could be reused. And so some of these skies appear in future images, and some of the images are buried, the components are buried deep into our library, which we never use, but there you go. Computer speeds were limited in those days. File sizes kind of maxed out around 100 megabytes. So things have changed. And continued to change. The editing power of Photoshop was just a bit impossible to really resist. And by taking these hand-drawn components and messing about with them in Photoshop, the final result could still have quite a strong resemblance to a hand-drawn original. Really, Photoshop became a bit of a magic box. Chapel at Oihi by Cheshire Architects took us to Yellowstone Park in 2008. This historic area of the Bay of Islands was one of New Zealand's earliest trading posts, also mission stations. Recorded church services were the first held there, and Samuel Martin was part of that. Also was the place of the earliest European school. So the Marsden Cross Trust Board and Ngāti Torahina came together with Cheshire Architects to explore ways how the special site could be recognised, celebrated and acknowledged. This Rory Kahu pavilion was the result. The actual building, as with quite a few of our projects, the actual building varied quite a bit from the early concept ideas. It took us to the USA, to San Francisco, where we experienced the city's response to earthquakes and fires. For many years they've been dealing with this issue. And the 1906 rebuild of the city was evident in one form in the city's inner city apartment buildings. This one was where a friend of ours lived. We celebrated with him and friends with the nomination in 2008 of Barack Obama. Then on to Yosemite, where we experienced the world of parkitecture. Yep. So parkitecture was the name assigned to the architectural style of many lodges within the US national parks. You think wood and stone, big fireplaces,
Huge.
handmade furnishings, expansive dining rooms, and usually big windows framing spectacular views. So yeah, the pen was usually pretty handy at this stage of the trip. I could sit down and start drawing. The valley floor, lush meadows, trees including Yosemite's giant sequoias, deer, if you look closely in the bottom of the drawing, and in behind those trees right there, just there,
Live bears.
live bears.
Yeah.
Yeah, more parkitecture in Yellowstone. We stayed in this building or in the lodges just next door. The parkitecture was really more properly described as the National Park Service rustic. National Park Service rustic. Yeah, the Old Faithful Lodge is where the conference was held. It appears handmade, but you know, whole logs and branches sort of thing.
Yeah.
In addition to its woody stuff, Yellowstone is known for its geothermal landscape. Its textures provide a ready source of subject matter and for some, you know, sit down, some relaxing hand penwork. One of the best parts of the conference was the retreat, which was that year held in Chico. And here there was more geothermal action, but contained in hot springs and pools. And the hills behind, deer frolicked. Yeah. On to Palm Springs, with its fantastic collection of desert modern architecture.
No notes.
Another example. Our motel in desert modern style, memories of hummingbirds, of heat, of horizontals contrasting with the height of the fan palm trees. We also saw these.
That was Steve McQueen's holiday house.
Steve McQueen, yeah. And so onto the Getty Centre, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And onto Venice Beach at Santa Monica. Chrissy on, and then we titled this one, Chrissy on Beach with Sketchpad. We also had hope.
So just across from where I was sitting doing the sketch was the very famous Frank Gehry Venice Beach House with the Hope poster. So we had hope. Here you go. So in 2011, two projects took us to Japan, the Kaikoura Wharf and Rotorua Lakefront. Rotorua Lakefront by Rate and Associates and Team Athfield Architects, Assembly Architects and Macindoe Urban. And the other one was the map, wasn't it, from Modern Architecture?
Kaikoura Wharf?
Yeah, Kaikoura Wharf. Where was that one? That one, yeah. And so this was Kaikoura Wharf, the end of wharf, modern architecture practice in conjunction with Ngātahu proposed a development on the existing fishing wharf in 2010, but with the earthquake in 2011 it was never realised. One of the jurors in the ASI was an American architectural illustrator as well, and he was a juror, and he commented that he just got back from a very lovely evening. It wasn't a real experience in a place that even exists yet. I was inhabiting a wonderful drawing. So that made us feel pretty good, and we got a trip to Japan. This was the beautiful, in the same year, the beautiful design from Megan Rate and Associates and Athfield Architects, and they were successful in their competition entry for the lake redevelopment. the illustration aimed to capture that quiet morning time before the crowds and before the helicopters and before the fog left the lake. These images gave us the opportunity to travel to Japan, which was fantastic, and that's another story because we nearly didn't go because of the tsunami. That was at the same time, well, actually just before. But anyway, we had a fabulous time. We saw lots of things and bought lots of shoes from shoe shops and weirdo places, and went to these whole street dedicated to architecture student projects, and they were realised. Now this is sort of like a red light sort of, isn't it, cocktail district. Yeah, but they're amazing. I mean, and they're all made of stainless steel and things. You probably all would have seen them.
So a lot of sitting in quiet contemplation within this case was a Kyoto temple garden, and bento box
Action.
packed with lunch delights, patterns and textural exercises in the quiet times, and temple tours, exhibition congestion.
Yeah, we were quite interested in the way they hung this exhibition, but you can see the Rotorua lakefront there. But that was part of the 2011 UAI, wasn't it? And it was an amazing international architectural congress going on at the same time as this, and at the same time as the SAIA. Anyway, there's me and my sister by another mother. Just having a tea ceremony and trying to decide what I was going to do with one of those bean cakes, you know. Anyway, so many photo opportunities in Japan. This was an onsen and a lodge and a ryokan. We stayed up in the mountains. Absolutely divine. Kinloch Lodge, Patterson Architects, a Jura Award.
On the shores of Lake Taupo. You can't see Lake Taupo. It is on the shores, Kinloch, but the lake is just around the corner. Not quite sure why we didn't show the lake. But Jura's comment was, this image took my breath away. So,
yeah, so
we imagined that that was pretty cool. That year, the ASI conference in 2013 was in San Francisco. So with Mexico so close, well, close enough, we decided to visit Tulum on the Yucatan Peninsula. Beach life in Tulum. And fascination with those sort of textures again, doorways and roofs. Sketchpad was always handy, and the Golden Gate Bridge was a very steady subject.
yeah.
Up to Monterey, and then down Pacific Highway via the Big Sur, through the redwood forest.
To the Gulf Spring waters.
And with a bit of glamping on the way.
Yeah, it was cold. It was getting cold. But to be in this forest and have that beautiful red carpet of redwood needles, and there was something about the acoustics and the smell and things that was astounding. On the way down the highway, we had to pass the Hearst Castle, and we went in, and this was an extraordinary tennis court. So that was probably the nicest piece
See the way the trees line up with the poles. Christchurch Memorial. Rayton Associates.
Award of Excellence.
Award of Excellence, 2016. Getting there. So this illustration was part of the Rayton Associates Memorial Design Competition submission. The memorial was for those who'd lost their lives in 2011 Christchurch earthquake. And it featured large paving slabs tilted into the river, a beautifully sculpted bridge, and a memorial wall with names of those who were lost. probably best experienced at dusk or dawn in a reflective mood. I suppose the imagery was intended to capture something of the contemplative intention of the design. This time round, we did not attend the conference to pick up the award in Boston. Why was that?
Trump was elected. I got the snitch.
Yeah. So we didn't go that year. I think we went north to New Plymouth.
Yeah.
But while not in the exhibition, some of these other associated images around Christchurch rebuild, the green spine forming core of the regeneration area, about 11 kilometres from city to the sea, and extending up to 150 metres into the red zones that provided a thread that brings the areas together. And in the heart of the city, proposals to rebuild the inner city housing. This was the East Frame design competition submission by Patterson Architects. Urban centres with pedestrian-focused spaces. And some medium density infill housing with ready access to green, always to green spaces, contemporary design suitable to a new city. And just through there on the right is the CBD, rebuilt, and in the rebuilding were a transformation. And away from the, I've just written something here, away from the planned brave new buildings, green spaces and dusky skies, the Canterbury Earthquake Committee Authority and the Ministry of Culture and Heritage were planning the official memorial to the 185 persons who had lost their lives. So we were very privileged to be part of this as part of the rebuild for Christchurch, and also to be part of the Rayton Associates and Atfield Architects submission for that competition. Just across the road, about the same time, we were starting our own earthquake strengthening project, which kept us busy for quite a few years. Big trenches.
Yeah, and that was, what, a
Lots of steel.
3 metre trench that was dug just before the Kaikoura earthquake.
Then along came the Kaikoura earthquake. So instead of a 7-storey building, we were suddenly an 8-storey building with a big trench around it.
Yeah.
At least we had some steel in there.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Concrete trucks. Steel frames all the way from New Plymouth late at night. And then they got erected onto the building. There was some slight architectural manoeuvres in the concrete ground level portals.
Which we had to push for, and you designed for free.
No fee. Yeah, but they did relieve an otherwise fairly strict engineering body corp budget expense response. There was we had an 18% NBS problem to deal with, and not a lot of money.
But boy, aren't we glad we did it when we did, because, you know, we got in early.
We did get in early.
Yeah.
We did get in early, and we managed to get to about 78%.
No, 80 plus. Sorry.
95.
Yeah. 95,
104.
95 minus.
So north. Most of you are probably familiar with this part of Auckland, Silo Park, part of the Wynyard Quarter, part of the rapidly changing industrial maritime fringe of the city. So Silo Park, Rayton Associates, again with Taylor, Cullity, Lethley, and Australian landscape architects.
And another Jurors Award, which was very flash, really, isn't it?
So this part of the Wynyard precinct was started in 2011, and this illustration was part of the successful competition entry part that was submitted by Rayton Associates with the other landscape architects. The gantry on the right was intended to show views out across the city and out towards North Head, and the bungee and abseiling up there didn't really make it off the ground. Apparently the bungee was probably going to get tied up with the yacht masts, so that kind of got ditched, so no bungee. A number of supplementary images supported that design process and the competition for other parts of the Wynyard Quarter. And behind the roadside of the redeveloped wharf edge, ghostly pre-design buildings head, conveniently screened by 40-year-old titoki trees. But interestingly enough, these trees were planted as 20-year-old specimens, so they are getting up to about half, three-quarters that height. So cocktail hour at the North Wharf. And inside, fun and food, prawns and mussels, right on the wharf. The brighter side of the development on the wharf side, in the full Auckland sun. This one looks quite bright, but it's actually an evening sort of dusky shot of the same development.
Now, that wasn't in the exhibition though, was it? No. But this was. The Kirikiri Roa.
Yeah, these were.
Yeah. So this was an ASAI submission, and I went through the process of putting this through because this is one of our most favourite images. And we didn't get picked. Well, I got the snitch then, so it was a double snitch. It was Trump and it was, but a lot of the... double snitch. A lot of the images that were winning the prizes from about 2017-18 onwards were hyper-realistic, super CGI stuff. So more hand-drawn stuff was sort of like put to the side. But this was definitely, this was commissioned by Hamilton City Council. They were developing a number of landscape initiatives to recognise significant historic sites in the city. So we were commissioned to provide 2 visualisations for a number of information panels located along the riverbank next to the city where Kirikiri Roa Pa once stood. There was detailed information as to the likely design elements, and this was provided by Hamilton City Council and their iwi advisors, as there was no photographic record existed of these pa sites. This is home to Ngāti Waieri for around 300 years. The pa was well known for its garden produce, and you can see that visible is the Coomera pits in the background. This produce was traded throughout the North Island with the river being the main transport link. This is mine.
So here, it's interesting because the stockade design changed around the time of the stockade. Sorry, the wars of the Musket Wars. Yeah, the Musket Wars. So this rectangular re-entrant kind of design allowed for crossfire, which only happened when the muskets came on scene. So it enabled a more effective defence against with firearms against an invading party, be it either Maori or the British soldiers who invaded the Waikato and they seized land around this whole area, basically confiscated land. They caused terrible loss to the local people and the loss of culture as well and livelihood. The pa was destroyed as the early Hamilton City was built on top of it.
Yeah.
So unique among our works, these are quite interesting ones because they show a historical indigenous architecture, which we hadn't really been involved with before. It's the architecture of the past, as opposed to the usual visualisation of the future. But then, 2 of our favourite illustrations, we were a little bit disappointed that we weren't recognised, but we did go.
Internationally, they were recognised. They were recognised in Marion Living Street.
Yeah, we were happy not to have the text.
We didn't want to go to that text
Conference because Trump, was once again dominating American politics here. So, Yeah.
So looking out from the exhibition to a new future and a van. We know illustration and art are in good hands. It was a wonderful opening and closing night, and
It was a closing afternoon. We had an opening night and a closing afternoon.
Our grandchildren had to get to bed.
Yeah.
So the exhibition did exceed our expectations.
Well, I
on
don't
all
think we
levels.
had any expectations, did we? We were so busy sort of doing it, and then it was there, and then, whoa, you know, it sort of happened. So, yeah, on all levels, it was a very enriching time.
The
for
levels
us.
also included seeing our grandchildren displaying their talents on the gallery windows, and the results were very interesting. A little bit more, they were a bit more interested in making their art than looking at ours, in fact.
And it was a very interesting clean-up the next day, wasn't it, when we had to scrape it all off the window. Pack it. Yeah.
So Bob Ross, yeah, so have a look at Bob Ross online, have a look at what he does.
Yeah.
He's quite an interesting artist.
And this is Taimana, who's 12, and he goes online and follows Bob Ross for tutorials. Does anyone know who Bob Ross is? Thank you. Yeah, Bob Ross.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah, he's got the frizzy perm, he's the sort of, and you know, you can, with 4 or 5 strokes, you can create a beautiful masterpiece. So this is what Taimana's doing, and he recreated a Bob Ross on the window, which was pretty special, wasn't it? Yeah.
So that's some acknowledgements and thanks to all those we've worked with over the last 25 years. A few of you here. From architects entrusting us with their designs, to those who were part of our own team. Special mention to 2 departed colleagues, mentors and friends, being Ath and Megan. Our lives would have been quite different without those 2 people in our lives.
They were very special to us,
It's been quite a privilege and pleasure to be part of just sometimes extraordinary, often beautiful projects at their inception. To realise the vision behind a project on behalf of its designer has been really quite rewarding.
Thoroughly
rewarding.
Yeah, that's really
Quite thoroughly rewarding. And we look forward to the next 25 years of visualising architecture.
And making art.
And making art.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. What an incredible 25 years.
Yeah, that was only a very short time.
No doubt there's so much more to come. I just enjoyed to see not only a fantastic amount of beautiful illustrations, but also the joy you've had with your partnership and the amazing travel you've had. It's been an absolute treat to see the world through your eyes. So thank you very much. And to everyone here, there's an opportunity to chat more with Ian and Chrissy. But first, please join me in thanking them once again.
Thank you, Tina. It's organising. And thank you for Judy.
And thank you to Ewan and to Judy.
Thank you. Well, this is very kind. What does he get and what do I get? Party and Albert. Thank you. Have we got time for a few questions, or is that the way
We can go into the it's a long have a blast.
Yeah, have a blast. Yeah. Do you want me